Hello there and welcome to Deep Sleep Seas. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day filled with tasks and obligations that weighed on your shoulders, demands that left you feeling drained and restless. Or perhaps you're the kind of person who finds comfort in the gentle rhythms of the ocean rather than counting sheep, who prefers the whisper of waves to the noise of the day, who seeks solace in the mysteries of the deep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you, crafted with care to ease you into rest, to let your thoughts untangle like kelp drifting in a gentle current, to carry you softly towards sleep on the rhythm of the tides. You've got nothing to do but rest now, nothing to plan, nothing to worry about, nothing to solve or fix or remember. All of that can wait until tomorrow. Right now, in this moment, your only task is to breathe, to relax, to let go. Let your mind release its grip on the day's concerns. Let the tension drain from your muscles, starting at the crown of your head and flowing downward through your neck and shoulders, down your arms, through your chest and back, down your legs, until every part of you feels heavy and warm and at peace. Let your breathing slow and deepen, each breath coming easier than the last, each exhale releasing a little more of the day's weight, and let your body grow light, as if the water itself has lifted you, as if you're floating in a warm tropical sea, cradled by salt water that holds you effortlessly, that asks nothing of you except to rest. Because tonight we aren't simply observing the ocean from a distance, standing on a beach or peering through an aquarium's glass. We're drifting alongside its most graceful wanderers, the sea snakes, serpents that left the solid ground behind millions of years ago to dance through warm tropical waters in an evolutionary journey that defies expectation and challenges everything we think we know about what snakes can be. These are creatures of elegant motion, mysterious and beautiful, hidden in plain sight beneath the waves where most of us never venture. They carry venom more potent than the most feared cobras, toxins that could kill with a single bite. Yet they possess temperaments as gentle as the turning tides, as peaceful as the sway of seagrass in a current. They are paradoxes, impossibilities made real, serpents that breathe air yet live entirely underwater, that hunt with deadly efficiency yet almost never harm the divers who swim beside them. We'll travel together through their world tonight, moving slowly through the warm waters where they make their homes. From their ancient origins on distant prehistoric shores, when the first snakes began venturing into tidal pools and river mouths, testing the boundaries between land and sea, we'll trace their evolutionary journey across millions of years. We'll discover how their bodies transformed, how scales changed and tails flattened, how lungs extended and nostrils relocated, each adaptation a small miracle of evolution, a solution to the challenges of living in salt water while still needing air to breathe. We'll explore their present lives woven seamlessly through coral gardens where they hunt among the crevices, and across open seas where some species drift with currents for their entire lives, never touching land from birth to death. We'll learn about their remarkable adaptations that allow them to do things that seem impossible for reptiles. We'll discover how they can stay underwater for hours without breathing, how some can absorb oxygen through their skin like fish, how they excrete excess salt through special glands in their mouths, how their eyes can see in the dim blue world beneath the waves, detecting wavelengths of light that our eyes cannot perceive. We'll explore their mysterious behaviors, watching as they hunt with patience and precision, as they shed their skin in the open water without rocks or branches to rub against, as they surface periodically for breath with movements so smooth they barely disturb the water. We'll witness their hunting strategies, from those that ambush prey by lying motionless at the surface, to those that actively pursue eels through coral labyrinths, to those that specialize in eating only fish eggs, scraping clusters from rocks with toothless jaws. We'll observe their courtship rituals, the slow underwater dances where males and females entwine, the competition between rival males, the gentle nudging and touching that precedes mating. And we'll see the birth of their young in the underwater world, tiny perfect snakes emerging from their mothers' bodies and swimming away immediately, instinctively knowing how to hunt and breathe and survive without any parental guidance. We'll learn about the diversity of species, more than 60 different kinds of sea snakes scattered across the tropical Indo-Pacific, each adapted to its particular niche. From the yellow-bellied sea snake that drifts in open ocean and never touches land, to the banded sea kraits that hunt by night and rest on beaches by day, to the tiny turtle-headed sea snakes that feed only on fish eggs and lack venom entirely, to the massive Stokes sea snake that can grow to 6 feet in length, we'll discover the differences between true sea snakes that are helpless on land and sea kraits that move easily between water and shore. And we'll consider the quiet threats they face in our changing oceans, the warming waters that bleach and kill the coral reefs where many species hunt, the rising sea temperatures that shift currents and alter prey distributions, the fishing nets that entangle them and drown them before they can surface for air, the mysterious population declines in places that seem pristine and protected, the pollution and noise and habitat destruction that affect them in ways we're only beginning to understand. We'll think about what their presence tells us about the health of marine ecosystems, how they serve as indicators of ocean vitality, and what their loss would mean for the intricate web of life beneath the waves. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you. Facts that challenge what you thought you knew about snakes or reveal the hidden complexity of ocean life that exists just beyond our easy view. Perhaps you'll be amazed to learn that sea snakes are more venomous than king cobras yet almost never bite humans, or that some species can stay underwater for 8 hours without taking a breath, or that they evolved from land snakes and returned to the ocean only 15 million years ago, a blink of an eye in evolutionary time. Or at the very least, these stories may spark curiosity as you drift towards sleep, planting seeds of wonder that will bloom in dreams of coral gardens and blue water and graceful serpents gliding through shafts of sunlight that penetrate from the surface far above. But before we begin this underwater journey, before we descend beneath the waves and enter the world of sea snakes, if you find these stories relaxing, if you appreciate learning while you rest, if the sound of my voice and the rhythm of these words helps ease you towards sleep, consider subscribing to Deep Sleep Seas, so you don't miss the next deep sea journey. There are so many wonders to explore in the ocean, so many creatures and ecosystems and mysteries that deserve to be told in this format, narrated slowly and gently for those who seek both knowledge and rest. And if you're awake enough, if your eyes are still open and your mind still engaged, let me know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Are you in a cold climate, wrapped in blankets against winter's chill, imagining warm tropical waters and the luxury of swimming without a wetsuit? Or are you in a coastal town, perhaps close enough to smell the salt air drifting through your window, to hear the distant sound of waves breaking on shore? Or perhaps you're landlocked, far from any ocean, and these stories are your window into a world you rarely see. I read every comment, every message, and I'm grateful you're here. Grateful you've chosen to spend this time drifting through the ocean with me. Now let's begin our journey into the world of sea snakes, those graceful wanderers of warm waters. Sea snakes are not what you might expect when you think of serpents. They are not the slithering creatures of forests and deserts that most of us picture when we hear the word snake. They did not evolve in the ocean, alongside fish and whales and dolphins. They are not primitive, ancient lineages that have existed in the sea since the dawn of life. No, sea snakes are newcomers to the marine world, and they came from the land, from the same terrestrial origins as the snakes that inhabit gardens and prairies and jungles around the world. This is one of their most fascinating qualities, this journey from shore to sea, this transformation from land-dwelling predators to fully aquatic hunters. Millions of years ago, long before humans walked upright, long before the continents had shifted into their current positions, certain snakes began a slow return to the water. The exact reasons remain somewhat mysterious, lost in the mists of deep time, but we can imagine the pressures and opportunities that might have driven this change. Perhaps it started simply with hunting near river mouths where fish were abundant and easy to catch. Perhaps certain snakes found that they could catch more prey by venturing into tidal pools, by waiting for fish to become trapped as the tide receded. Perhaps they discovered that the water offered refuge from predators, a three-dimensional space where they could escape threats that pursued them on land. Whatever the initial impetus, some snakes began spending more and more time in aquatic environments, and over countless generations, over millions of years of slow accumulation of tiny changes, those that ventured deeper into the sea found new opportunities, new prey, new territories unclaimed by other predators. And gradually, impossibly, beautifully, they changed. Evolution shaped them, molded them, refined them for a life in salt water. Their bodies compressed laterally, flattening from side to side, so that their cross-section became more oval than round. This compression reduced drag, allowed them to cut through water with less resistance, made them more hydrodynamic. Their tails transformed from simple tapered points into paddles, widening and flattening to create broad surfaces that could push against the water with each undulation, generating thrust more efficiently than any tail designed for crawling ever could. Their scales smoothed and reduced, especially on their bellies, where terrestrial snakes have wide overlapping plates that grip surfaces and provide traction for forward movement. In sea snakes, these belly scales shrank or disappeared entirely, until some species lost the ability to crawl on land completely, their smooth bellies offering no purchase on dry surfaces. They became helpless on shore, flopping awkwardly, unable to move with any coordination. But in water, they were transformed, graceful and swift and perfectly adapted. They developed valves in their nostrils, tiny flaps of specialized tissue that close automatically when submerged, keeping water from flooding delicate passages that lead to the lungs. These valves open when the snake surfaces, allowing air to flow freely, and then seal shut the instant the snake descends again. It's an elegant solution to a fundamental problem: how to have nostrils that can take in air but don't take in water. Their lungs extended along nearly the entire length of their bodies, much longer proportionally than the lungs of terrestrial snakes. This elongation serves multiple purposes. It increases oxygen storage capacity, allowing longer dives between breaths. It distributes buoyancy along the body, helping the snake maintain horizontal position in the water without constantly fighting to stay level. And the rear portion of the lung, which doesn't participate in gas exchange, acts as a swim bladder of sorts, helping the snake control its depth with subtle adjustments in lung volume rising or sinking as needed. Some species even evolved the ability to absorb oxygen through their skin, an adaptation so unusual for reptiles that scientists initially doubted it was possible. Reptilian skin is thick and scaly, designed to prevent water loss, not to allow gas exchange. But experiments with the yellow-bellied sea snake revealed that this species can satisfy about 30% of its oxygen requirements through cutaneous respiration, breathing through the skin, particularly through a highly vascularized area on top of the head where blood vessels lie close to the surface. This allows for extended dive times, reduces the need to surface in dangerous or exposed areas, and provides a backup source of oxygen when the lungs are depleted. It's a remarkable adaptation, one that blurs the line between reptile and fish, between air breather and water breather. These changes did not happen quickly. Evolution works slowly, patiently, over immense spans of time. The earliest sea snakes diverged from their terrestrial relatives around 15 to 20 million years ago during the early Miocene epoch, a time when the Earth's climate was warmer than today, when sea levels were higher, when tropical waters extended farther north and south than they do now. The transition occurred somewhere in the region we now call the Coral Triangle, that rich meeting place of the Indian and Pacific Oceans near Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and northern Australia. This region, even today, is the epicenter of marine biodiversity, home to more species of fish, coral, mollusks, and marine life than anywhere else on Earth. It was here in these warm, productive waters that terrestrial snakes first made the leap to marine life, adapting to a world of salt and current and depth. From that single evolutionary experiment, from those first pioneering snakes that ventured into the sea and found success, sea snakes radiated outward, diversifying into more than 60 species, each adapting to slightly different niches, different prey, different depths and currents and habitats. Some specialized in hunting eels, developing narrow heads and slender bodies to reach deep into crevices. Others targeted fish, learning to ambush or actively pursue their prey through coral forests. A few became egg specialists, feeding exclusively on fish eggs and losing their venom entirely since they had no need to subdue struggling prey. The diversity is remarkable, a testament to the opportunity that the ocean represented, the vast unexploited resources available to any predator that could adapt to the challenges of marine life. The most spectacular radiation occurred much more recently, perhaps only 3 to 5 million years ago, when genetic elements in their genomes underwent rapid expansion. Transposable elements, fragments of DNA that can copy themselves and insert into new locations in the genome, exploded in number, creating genetic variation at an accelerated pace. This burst of genetic innovation likely facilitated rapid adaptation to new marine environments, allowing sea snakes to diversify quickly, to try out new body plans and behaviors and physiologies, without waiting for the slow accumulation of random mutations. It was as if evolution pressed fast forward, sculpting bodies and behaviors at remarkable speed, producing the diversity of species we see today in just a few million years. Today, sea snakes belong to the family Elapidae, the same family that includes cobras, mambas, coral snakes, and kraits, all venomous snakes with permanently erect fangs. They carry that lineage in their venom and in the structure of their skulls and teeth. Their fangs are short, typically only 2 to 4 millimeters long, and they're fixed in place at the front of the upper jaw, not hinged or retractable like the fangs of vipers. Behind the fangs are smaller teeth, as many as 18 in some species, used for gripping prey and working it back toward the throat for swallowing. The venom is delivered through hollow fangs connected to glands located behind and below the eyes. When the snake bites, muscles contract around the venom glands, forcing venom through ducts and into the fangs, injecting it deep into the victim's tissue. But unlike their terrestrial cousins, many of which are aggressive when threatened and quick to strike in defense, sea snakes rarely use their venom against anything they can't eat. They are among the most docile venomous creatures on Earth. Divers frequently encounter them, swimming alongside them for extended periods, and bites are extraordinarily rare. When they do occur, it's almost always because the snake was handled carelessly, grabbed or stepped on, trapped against a net or a diver's body where it felt cornered and defensive. Even then, many bites are dry, no venom injected, just a warning, a request to be left alone. Sea snakes are not interested in wasting their precious venom on creatures they cannot consume. Venom is metabolically expensive to produce, and they use it judiciously, saving it for prey. Sea snakes belong to two main evolutionary groups, two different lineages that returned to the sea independently and evolved similar adaptations through convergent evolution. The true sea snakes, numbering around 55 species, belong to the subfamily Hydrophinae. These are fully aquatic and helpless on land. They spend their entire lives in the ocean, hunting, mating, giving birth, and eventually dying without ever touching solid ground. Their adaptation to marine life is complete. They have lost the enlarged belly scales that terrestrial snakes use for locomotion on land. Their bodies are so compressed and streamlined that they cannot generate forward movement on flat surfaces. If one washes ashore, alive or dead, it flops helplessly, thrashing in place, unable to crawl back to the water. They are as helpless on land as fish, utterly dependent on remaining in the ocean. Then there are the sea kraits, only 5 species which belong to a different subfamily, Laticodinae. Sea kraits retained more of their terrestrial heritage. They still come ashore regularly to rest, digest meals, and most importantly, to lay eggs. They are not live bearers like the true sea snakes. They are oviparous, laying clutches of eggs in limestone caves, rock crevices, or hidden spots beneath dense vegetation on beaches. These eggs develop over several months, warmed by the sun and ambient air, until the hatchlings emerge and instinctively crawl toward the ocean to begin their lives. Sea kraits move between worlds, equally comfortable in water and on land, bridging the gap between their ancestors and their fully marine relatives. The distinction is visible in their scales. Sea kraits retained their belly scales, those wide overlapping plates that provide grip, allowing them to climb rocks and slither across beaches with ease. Their bodies are also more cylindrical, less laterally compressed than true sea snakes, a compromise that works adequately in water but maintains functionality on land. It is a small detail, this difference in belly scales and body shape, but it speaks to a fundamental difference in lifestyle, a choice that evolution made, or perhaps a transition still underway. Sea kraits are often considered more primitive, less specialized, retaining ancestral features that their fully aquatic relatives discarded. But primitive doesn't mean inferior. Sea kraits are successful in their own right, abundant in many parts of the Indo-Pacific, thriving in their dual existence, and they offer us a window into what the earliest sea snakes might have been like, animals that spent time both in water and on land, not fully committed to either environment, flexible and adaptable, testing the possibilities. The evolutionary journey of sea snakes reveals something profound about adaptation, about the flexibility of life, about the power of natural selection to reshape bodies and behaviors to fit new environments. They show us that the boundary between land and sea is not fixed, not an impassable barrier. Life flows between environments when conditions favor it, when opportunity beckons and resources await. The same genetic toolkit that built terrestrial hunters, snakes that slithered through grass and climbed trees and burrowed through sand, was repurposed, modified, and refined to create marine predators. Genes that controlled body shape were adjusted to produce lateral compression. Genes that regulated scale growth were altered to reduce belly scales. Genes that determined the length of the lung were modified to extend it along the body. Genes related to salt balance were enhanced to excrete excess sodium. Genes for venom composition were tweaked to work quickly in cold-blooded fish rather than warm-blooded mammals. The changes go deep, all the way to the cellular level. Genes related to hypoxia tolerance, the body's response to low oxygen, were enhanced and selected for, allowing sea snakes to survive longer without breathing. When oxygen levels drop during extended dives, these genes trigger the production of proteins that protect cells from damage, that allow metabolism to continue at reduced levels, that prioritize oxygen delivery to essential organs like the brain and heart. Visual pigments in their eyes shifted to detect wavelengths of light that penetrate deeper water, blues and ultraviolets that dominate beneath the waves while reds and oranges are quickly absorbed. Sea snakes lost sensitivity to longer wavelengths that are useless underwater and gained sensitivity to shorter wavelengths that provide useful information in the marine environment. Some species even re-evolved color vision abilities that their terrestrial ancestors lost, a rare example of evolution reversing course, reclaiming traits that were discarded millions of years ago when snakes adapted to nocturnal lifestyles, and then under new pressures in the variable light conditions of the ocean, needed once again. Sensory organs on their scales developed to detect vibrations in water, fine-tuned mechanoreceptors that respond to the pressure waves created by swimming fish, by moving water, by disturbances in the current. These receptors compensate for the muffled sounds and distorted sense of the underwater world. Sound travels differently in water, faster, but also more chaotically, bouncing and refracting in ways that make it hard to pinpoint the location of a source. Scent is diluted and dispersed by currents, chemical signals spreading out in unpredictable patterns. Sea snakes needed new ways to sense their environment, and evolution provided them, one adaptation at a time, building a sensory suite optimized for the ocean. Even their venom changed, evolving to work in the specific conditions they encountered as marine predators. Sea snake venom evolved to work quickly in cold-blooded fish, animals whose metabolism and nerve function differ from warm-blooded mammals. The venom contains powerful neurotoxins that block nerve signals, preventing muscles from contracting, causing paralysis that spreads rapidly from the bite site. It also contains myotoxins that break down muscle tissue directly, causing cells to rupture and release their contents. In fish, these toxins work within minutes or even seconds, immobilizing prey almost instantly so it cannot escape or injure the snake during the swallowing process. Drop for drop. Some sea snake venoms are among the most potent in the animal kingdom, far more toxic than most land snakes when tested in laboratory animals. The venom of Dubois' sea snake, for instance, is extraordinarily powerful, capable of killing a human many times over with the amount contained in a single bite. Yet because their fangs are short, often only 2 to 4 millimeters long, barely longer than a splinter, and because their venom output is small, human fatalities are exceedingly rare. The short fangs often cannot penetrate thick clothing like wetsuits, and even when they do penetrate skin, they may not inject deeply enough to deliver a dangerous dose. And sea snakes rarely choose to bite humans at all. They're not defensive or territorial. They don't strike at divers who approach them. When they do bite, which is almost always accidental, when a fisherman grabs one while untangling nets or when someone accidentally steps on one in shallow water, the snake often gives a dry bite, no venom injected, just a warning. They are not interested in using their precious resources on creatures they cannot eat. Their venom is a tool for hunting, not a weapon of defense. There is a quiet elegance to their existence that becomes apparent when you watch them in their natural habitat. Sea snakes do not thrash or struggle or waste energy on unnecessary movement. They glide, their bodies moving through water with fluid grace, each movement efficient and purposeful. Watching a sea snake swim is like watching silk ribbon unfurl in slow motion underwater, each undulation traveling smoothly down the body from head to tail, the paddle-shaped tail providing thrust with minimal effort. They navigate coral labyrinths with precision, slipping into crevices and holes where fish hide, their slender bodies an advantage in tight spaces. Their lateral compression, that flattening from side to side, allows them to fit through gaps that would be impassable for a cylindrical snake of the same mass. They can enter coral formations and rock piles where prey seeks refuge, pursuing their quarry into spaces where larger predators cannot follow. Some species hunt on sandy bottoms, probing burrows with their snouts, searching for gobies and other fish that hide in the substrate. Their tongues flick constantly, sampling the water, detecting chemical cues that indicate the presence of prey. When they locate a burrow, they insert their heads, sometimes their entire forebody, reaching deep into the tunnel, and then they wait, patient and still, for the occupant to move. The slightest vibration, the faintest disturbance, triggers a strike, fangs sinking into flesh before the prey can react. Others drift near the surface, species like the yellow-bellied sea snake, waiting for fish to pass beneath them, to seek shelter under what appears to be floating debris. These snakes lie motionless, conserving energy, their brightly colored bodies actually serving as lures, attracting curious fish that associate floating objects with food and protection. When a fish ventures close enough, the snake strikes sideways, its mouth agape, sweeping through the water to snare the prey in a surprise attack. Each species has found its niche, its strategy, its rhythm in the vast blue world, and they are not rare, not in most of their range. In certain tropical waters, sea snakes are among the most abundant predators, more common than many people realize. Divers in the Philippines, Indonesia, Australia, Papua New Guinea, and the countless islands scattered across the western Pacific frequently encounter them, often multiple individuals on a single dive. Some species form loose aggregations, particularly during breeding season, when dozens or even hundreds may gather in favorable areas, drawn together by the urge to mate and by the concentration of prey that occurs in certain locations. There are historical accounts of sea snakes forming vast floating lines at the ocean's surface, stretching for kilometers, masses of snakes gathered together in numbers that defy easy comprehension. One such sighting in the Strait of Malacca in 1932 reported a line of snakes 3 meters wide and 100 kilometers long, millions of individuals moving as one writhing mass. The ship's crew estimated they saw millions of snakes, all of the same species, all swimming in the same direction, following some instinct or environmental cue that we do not fully understand. The phenomenon is not unique. Similar aggregations have been reported from other parts of the Indo-Pacific, though they seem to be less common now, or at least rarely reported. Whether this represents an actual decline in sea snake populations or simply a decline in the kind of long ocean voyages where such phenomena might be observed, no one can say for certain. The most likely explanation is that these gatherings are related to reproduction, that at certain times and places, sea snakes congregate to mate, drawn together by pheromones and favorable conditions, creating temporary concentrations of individuals that then disperse once mating is complete. But such dramatic gatherings aside, sea snakes live in a world defined by water temperature, salinity, and light, factors that determine where they can thrive and where they cannot. They are creatures of the tropics and subtropics, most comfortable in waters between 18 and 30 degrees Celsius, roughly 64 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. They have little tolerance for cold. Their metabolism, like all reptiles, is tied to environmental temperature. As water cools, their bodies cool, their metabolism slows, their movements become sluggish. Below a certain threshold, they cannot function, cannot hunt, cannot swim effectively. Cold seas repel them, forming barriers that limit their distribution. This is why, despite their remarkable adaptations for marine life and their impressive diversity, you will not find sea snakes in the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic, for all its vastness, for all its warm equatorial zones and rich Caribbean reefs, is entirely devoid of sea snakes. The reason for this absence remains somewhat unclear, one of those biogeographical mysteries that scientists continue to debate. Perhaps they simply never dispersed that far during their evolutionary history. The journey from the Indo-Pacific to the Atlantic would require passing around southern Africa or southern South America, both regions where water temperatures drop significantly due to cold currents. The Benguela Current along Africa's west coast and the Humboldt Current along South America's west coast bring frigid water from Antarctic and subantarctic regions, creating barriers of cold water that sea snakes might be unable to cross. Or perhaps sea snakes did reach the Atlantic in prehistoric times, during warmer periods when ocean currents differed from today's patterns, but failed to establish permanent populations, unable to compete with established predators or find suitable prey. Or perhaps the Atlantic simply never provided the right combination of conditions, the coral reefs and shallow tropical waters and abundant prey that sea snakes prefer. Whatever the reason, the Atlantic is a gap in their range, a vast blue desert where no sea snake swims, a notable absence in a family that otherwise dominates tropical marine environments. Instead, sea snakes dominate the Indo-Pacific, their range stretching from the eastern coast of Africa, along the shores of Madagascar and the islands of the Indian Ocean, through the warm waters of Southeast Asia with its thousands of islands and complex coastlines, across northern Australia with its vast continental shelf and the Great Barrier Reef, and into the Pacific, reaching as far east as the western coasts of Central and South America. This distribution spans half the globe, encompassing the warmest, most biologically productive marine environments on Earth. Within this vast range, different species occupy different territories, some with broad distributions spanning thousands of kilometers, others restricted to small areas, endemic to particular islands or reef systems. One species, the yellow-bellied sea snake, Hydrophis platurus, is particularly widespread, so widespread in fact that it holds the distinction of being the most widely distributed snake in the world, terrestrial or marine. This remarkable serpent is found from the coast of East Africa eastward across the entire Indo-Pacific and into the eastern Pacific, reaching as far north as southern California and as far south as New Zealand and Chile. Its range is truly global within the tropical and warm temperate zones. The secret to its success is adaptation to a pelagic lifestyle, a life in open ocean far from any coastline. Unlike most sea snakes, which hug the shores and coral reefs, never venturing far from the security of shallow water and complex habitats, the yellow-bellied sea snake lives its entire life in open water, drifting with surface currents across thousands of kilometers of featureless blue, hunting fish that shelter beneath floating debris and mats of seaweed. It is a nomad of the high seas, carried by winds and tides and currents, a speck of life in the vast emptiness, perfectly adapted to an existence that would be impossible for its reef-dwelling relatives. It has no territory, no home reef, no familiar hunting grounds. It simply drifts, following the food, following the currents, living and breeding and eventually dying in water that may be kilometers deep, above ocean floor it will never see, surrounded by blue in every direction. This lifestyle has allowed it to colonize distant shores, to reach isolated islands, to spread across ocean basins that other sea snakes cannot cross. When unusual currents or storms carry individuals into colder waters, they sometimes wash ashore on beaches where sea snakes are never normally seen, creating surprising encounters for beachgoers in places like California or Tasmania or New Zealand. These are almost certainly stragglers, individuals carried far from their normal range by unusual oceanographic conditions, unlikely to survive long in the cold water, but testament to the wandering nature of this species. But the majority of sea snake species, the 50-some other species that make up the family, prefer shallower, more structured environments. Coral reefs are their kingdoms, their hunting grounds, their homes. These underwater gardens, bursting with life and color, built over centuries and millennia by countless tiny coral polyps secreting calcium carbonate skeletons, provide endless opportunities for predators. Fish dart among coral branches, seeking shelter from larger hunters. Eels hide deep in crevices, emerging only at night to hunt. Gobies rest on sandy patches between coral formations, camouflaged against the substrate. Shrimp and crabs hide in holes and under ledges, and sea snakes patrol these spaces with purpose, their keen senses attuned to every movement, every vibration, every chemical signal that might indicate prey. Some species specialize, developing highly specific diets and hunting strategies that set them apart from their relatives. The turtle-headed sea snakes, genus Emidocephalus, feed exclusively on fish eggs, scraping clusters from rocks and coral with blunt toothless jaws. They have lost their venom entirely over evolutionary time, having no need for the complex cocktail of toxins that other sea snakes use to subdue struggling prey. Fish eggs don't struggle. They can't flee. They don't require venom to immobilize. So these species evolved a different strategy, developing powerful jaws and specialized teeth designed for crushing and scraping rather than piercing and injecting. They patrol the reef methodically, searching for the gelatinous masses of eggs that fish deposit on hard surfaces, and when they find a cluster, they feed methodically, consuming hundreds or thousands of eggs in a single feeding session. It's a vegetarian lifestyle by snake standards, though the eggs are technically animal matter, and it allows these species to avoid competition with other predators who hunt mobile prey. Other species hunt eels, particularly moray and conger eels that occupy burrows and holes throughout the reef. These snakes have evolved narrower heads and longer bodies relative to their girth, adaptations that allow them to reach deep into tight spaces where eels retreat. The hunting strategy requires patience and precision. The snake approaches a crevice where an eel might hide, and it pauses, tongue flicking rapidly, sampling the water, searching for the chemical signature of its prey. If it detects an eel, it begins probing, inserting its head into the darkness of the hole, pushing deeper, its body following, compressed and streamlined enough to fit through gaps that seem impossibly small. When it finds the eel, wedged into the back of the crevice, the snake strikes quickly, fangs sinking into flesh, venom flowing. Then comes the waiting. The eel is strong, muscular, and it has wedged itself in place by pressing its body against the walls of the burrow. The snake cannot simply pull it free through brute force, but the venom works quickly, relaxing muscles, disrupting nerve signals, and within minutes the eel goes limp. Only then can the snake extract its prey, backing out of the crevice carefully, drawing the eel with it, and then positioning the eel's head toward its mouth for swallowing. Other species target different prey. Some hunt gobies and other bottom-dwelling fish, species that rest on sand or hide under rubble. Some take wrasses and damselfish that swim actively among the coral branches. A few species specialize in burrowing eels, the garden eels and snake eels that live in sand, their bodies concealed except for their heads, which they extend to feed on plankton drifting past in the current. These snakes have developed remarkably thin heads and necks, almost thread-like, narrow enough to enter the burrow after the eel to pursue it deep into the sand where it tries to escape. The diversity of prey preferences reduces competition among species. In areas where multiple sea snake species coexist, studies have shown that they rarely compete directly for food. Each specializes in different prey, different habitats, different hunting times, partitioning the available resources so that all can coexist. There is cooperation too in the hunting behaviors of certain species, partnerships that blur the line between coincidence and strategy. The yellow-lipped sea crate, one of the most studied and photographed sea snake species, has been observed hunting in tandem with fish, particularly trevally and goatfish. The relationship works like this. The snake searches crevices in the coral, probing holes and gaps with its head, and when it flushes prey from hiding, the fish waiting nearby dart in to catch whatever emerges. In return, the confusion created by the hunting fish makes it easier for the snake to catch prey that might otherwise escape. Both parties benefit. The fish get meals they couldn't obtain on their own, prey hidden in spaces too tight for them to enter. The snake benefits from the chaos, catching disoriented fish that are focused on the threat from the hunting fish and don't notice the snake approaching from another angle. This behavior is not planned cooperation, not conscious teamwork in the way we might think of it. The snakes and fish aren't communicating or strategizing together, but it is cooperation nonetheless, an evolved behavior that benefits all parties, a partnership that has emerged through natural selection because individuals that hunted together caught more food than individuals that hunted alone. Such partnerships are rare in the reptile world, a testament to the complex social dynamics that can emerge even in creatures we consider solitary, even in animals with relatively simple brains and limited cognitive abilities. The ocean is full of such relationships, mutualisms and partnerships and cooperative behaviors that make survival easier for all involved. Sea snakes also exhibit another unusual behavior related to their aquatic lifestyle. They shed their skin frequently, much more often than their terrestrial relatives, sometimes as often as every 2 to 3 weeks. Terrestrial snakes shed their skin periodically to accommodate growth, to remove parasites, and to heal injuries, but the process usually occurs only a few times per year. Sea snakes shed more frequently for an additional reason. Their skin becomes a substrate for algae, barnacles, and other marine organisms that settle and grow, creating drag and potentially interfering with respiration through the skin. The ocean is full of larvae, tiny organisms drifting in the plankton, searching for hard surfaces where they can attach and grow. A snake's skin with its complex texture of scales provides excellent attachment sites. Over time, a sea snake can become encrusted with growth, its sleek profile degraded, its ability to move efficiently through water compromised. To combat this, sea snakes rub against rocks and coral, loosening the old skin and sloughing it off in the water. The process is similar to how terrestrial snakes shed, rubbing against rough surfaces to catch the edge of the old skin and then crawling forward, turning the skin inside out as it peels away. But sea snakes have a challenge that land snakes don't face. They need to shed in water without the benefit of dry surfaces that provide good friction. Some species solve this by visiting shallow reefs where rocks and coral provide abrasive surfaces. They rub methodically, working the old skin loose until it finally releases and drifts away in the current, a ghostly translucent tube that may eventually wash ashore or sink to the bottom or be consumed by scavenging fish. The yellow-bellied sea snake, living far from hard surfaces in the middle of the ocean, has developed a remarkable alternative strategy. It ties itself into a knot, coiling and twisting its body upon itself, using the friction between coils to peel away the old skin. The behavior is fascinating to watch. The snake begins by bringing its tail forward toward its head, forming a loose loop. Then it continues coiling, passing sections of its body through the loop. tightening and loosening, creating complex knots that slide along the length of its body. Where coil presses against coil, the friction catches the old skin and pulls it loose. The process can last for hours, a slow, meditative activity, the snake patiently working until the translucent skin slips free and drifts away into the current. This knotting behavior serves another purpose as well. It helps dislodge organisms that have attached to the skin, barnacles and algae that might not come off with the shed skin alone. The mechanical action of coiling and rubbing, skin sliding against skin, provides enough force to scrape away incrustations, keeping the snake's body clean and hydrodynamic. Sea snakes are not large animals by serpent standards. Most species measure between 1 and 1.5 meters in length, roughly 3 to 5 feet, though some individuals grow larger. The largest species, Hydrophis spiraris, sometimes called the yellow sea snake, can reach 3 meters, nearly 10 feet, an impressive size for a fully aquatic snake. But most are modest in dimensions, their bodies built for maneuverability rather than bulk, for fitting into crevices rather than overpowering large prey. Their mass is distributed along a long, slender frame, and their lateral compression makes them appear even more delicate than they actually are. A sea snake that measures 5 feet in length might weigh only a kilogram or 2, perhaps 4 pounds, light and streamlined and built for efficiency. Their coloration varies widely among species, from subtle to striking, from camouflage to advertisement. Some species are brightly banded, alternating rings of black and white or black and yellow or black and blue-gray, bold patterns that stand out against the reef. These patterns may serve as warning signals to potential predators, honest advertisements of venomous defense, similar to the bright colors of poison dart frogs or coral snakes. Predators that have encountered sea snakes before, that have experienced the consequences of biting a venomous serpent, learn to recognize these patterns and avoid them. Other species are drab, olive or brown or gray or mottled, blending into murky coastal waters or sandy bottoms or seagrass beds. These snakes rely on camouflage rather than warning, on being invisible rather than being avoided. Their coloration matches their environment so perfectly that they can lie motionless on the bottom, completely unnoticed by passing prey and predators alike. The yellow-bellied sea snake is aptly named, its dorsal side dark blue-black, and its ventral side bright yellow. A color combination that might seem conspicuous but actually serves a purpose. This is countershading, a common adaptation in pelagic animals, in creatures that live at the ocean's surface where light comes from above, seen from below looking up toward the bright sky. The yellow belly of the snake blends with the sunlit surface, making the snake less visible to predators approaching from depth. Seen from above, looking down into the dark water, the black back blends with the darkness below, again making the snake harder to see. It's a simple optical trick, but an effective one, helping the snake avoid detection by sharks and large fish that might prey upon it. Sea snakes have few natural predators despite being abundant in many ecosystems. The reason is simple: they're venomous, and their venom can be lethal even to large marine animals. Most predators learn to avoid them. Large fish, such as groupers and sharks, occasionally prey on sea snakes, swallowing them whole before the venom can be injected, or crushing them quickly to prevent a bite. Some sea eagles and sea hawks specialize in catching sea snakes, diving from the air to grab snakes at the surface, then flying to shore to consume them. But these predators are relatively few. Most animals that encounter sea snakes leave them alone, recognizing either through instinct or learned experience that these serpents are dangerous. Some sea kraits employ a clever defense when threatened. When a predator approaches, the snake waves its tail, which remarkles its head in color and pattern, fooling the attacker into striking the wrong end. The tail is marked with the same dark bands and light background as the head, and when the snake holds its tail up and waves it, many predators instinctively strike at what appears to be the snake's head. By the time the predator realizes its mistake, discovers that it has bitten a tail rather than a head, the snake has had time to escape, swimming quickly away while the confused predator examines its worthless catch. It's a simple deception, but it works often enough to have been favored by natural selection, maintained in the population, because snakes with more convincing tail displays survive more often than snakes whose tails don't resemble their heads. The life cycle of a sea snake is intimately tied to the ocean in ways that seem almost miraculous when you consider that these are reptiles, air-breathing animals that evolved on land. Most species, the true sea snakes, give birth to live young in the water, never needing to return to shore for reproduction. They are ovoviviparous, a term that describes animals where eggs develop and hatch inside the mother's body, and she gives birth to fully formed offspring. The eggs are retained in the oviducts, the tubes that connect the ovaries to the outside world, and the developing embryos receive nutrients from the yolk sac, the same source that would feed them if the eggs were laid externally. But instead of being deposited somewhere safe to develop independently, they remain inside the mother, protected and carried, until they're fully formed and ready to survive on their own. The gestation period varies considerably among species, and even within species, depending on environmental conditions. It can last anywhere from 4 months to 11 months, nearly a full year, depending on factors like water temperature, food availability, and the mother's overall health and age. Warmer water speeds development. Cold water slows it. A well-fed mother with plenty of energy can support her developing young more effectively than a mother who is struggling to find food. The number of offspring also varies, from as few as 2 to as many as 34 in exceptional cases, though most species produce between 2 and 9 young per litter. Larger females typically produce more offspring than smaller females, their greater body size allowing them to carry more developing embryos. When the time comes, when the young are fully developed and ready to enter the world, the mother simply releases them into the water. There is no nest, no protected nursery, no safe haven. She gives birth in the open ocean, and the baby snakes, each measuring around 20 to 25 centimeters, about 8 to 10 inches, immediately swim away, dispersing in different directions. There is no parental care, no protection, no teaching or guidance. The young are born with all the instincts they need. They can hunt, catching tiny fish and invertebrates from their first day of life. They can swim efficiently, their paddle tails providing propulsion, their compressed bodies cutting through water. They know instinctively to surface for air, to hunt for food, to avoid predators. It is a harsh beginning, sink or swim in the most literal sense, and mortality is undoubtedly high. Many young snakes are eaten by predators in their first weeks of life. Others may starve if they fail to find prey. Some may wash into unsuitable habitats or encounter environmental conditions they cannot tolerate. But enough survive to sustain the population, generation after generation, the successful offspring carrying forward the genes that made their survival possible. Females typically reach sexual maturity in their 4th or 5th year. Males a year or 2 earlier, around their 3rd year. This delayed maturity is common in long-lived species, animals that have plenty of time to grow and mature before reproducing. Sea snakes can live for 10 to 15 years or more, depending on the species and environmental conditions, giving them multiple opportunities to breed over their lifetimes. Females do not necessarily breed every year. Reproduction is energetically costly, requiring significant resources to produce eggs and nourish developing embryos. And in years when food is scarce or conditions are poor, females may skip breeding, conserving their energy for survival rather than reproduction. This flexibility allows sea snake populations to respond to environmental variability, producing more young in good years and fewer in bad years, maintaining stability over the long term. Sea kraits, by contrast, must return to land to lay eggs. They are oviparous, producing clutches of 4 to 20 eggs, depending on the species and the size of the female, and these eggs require terrestrial environments to develop properly. A sea krait female, when her eggs are ready to be laid, leaves the water and travels inland, sometimes covering surprising distances from the shore, searching for a suitable site. She seeks out limestone caves, rock crevices, or hidden spots beneath dense vegetation, on beaches, places that will remain dry even during high tides, places that predators are unlikely to discover. When she finds an appropriate location, she deposits her eggs, soft-shelled and white, clustered together, and then she returns to the sea, leaving them to develop on their own. The eggs incubate for several months, warmed by ambient air temperature and the sun's heat penetrating the cave or crevice. Development proceeds slowly, the embryos growing inside their shells, forming muscles and scales and organs, until finally they're ready to hatch. The hatchlings use a small, temporary egg tooth to cut through the shell from inside, emerging into a world they've never seen, guided only by instinct. Their first task is to find the ocean. How they know which direction to go remains somewhat mysterious. They may be guided by the scent of salt water, by the sound of waves, by the angle of light, or by some combination of cues. But somehow most of them find their way, these tiny snakes no longer than a pencil, crawling across sand or rock, navigating obstacles, driven by an innate urge toward the water. It is a precarious journey, perhaps the most dangerous passage of their lives, and many hatchlings never make it. Birds snatch them up, crabs catch them, terrestrial predators find them, but enough survive, reaching the water and diving in, swimming away from shore, beginning their dual lives between land and sea. Mating in sea snakes is a complex and surprisingly gentle affair, far removed from the violent struggles that characterize reproduction in some animals. It begins with chemical signals. Males locate females by following pheromone trails in the water, those invisible plumes of scent that drift with the current. A female snake, when she's ready to mate, releases pheromones from glands near her cloaca, the multi-purpose opening at the base of her tail that serves for both waste elimination and reproduction. These chemical messages announce her receptivity, her species, perhaps even her health and genetic quality. Males, their forked tongues constantly sampling the water, detect these pheromones and follow them upstream, swimming against the current, zeroing in on the source. When a male finds a female, he approaches slowly, cautiously, his behavior shifting from search mode to courtship mode. He nudges her head or neck with his snout, gentle touches that announce his presence and his intentions. If she is receptive, if she accepts his advances, she may pause, holding position in the water, allowing him to come alongside her. If she's not receptive, if she's already mated or not quite ready, or simply doesn't prefer this particular male, she may swim away, rejecting his courtship. Males do not force copulation, they cannot. The female must cooperate, must align her body with his, must open her cloaca to receive him. Without her participation, mating is impossible. In many species, multiple males compete for a single female, drawn to her location by the same pheromone trail. When this happens, competition may occur, with males jostling and intertwining, each trying to position himself alongside the female, each attempting to be the one she chooses. But the competition is not violent. Sea snakes do not fight aggressively for mates. They do not bite each other or engage in the combat dances that some terrestrial snakes perform. Instead, they simply persist, staying close to the female, demonstrating their fitness through endurance and attentiveness. The female ultimately chooses, responding to one male and ignoring the others, though the criteria she uses to make her choice remain unclear. Perhaps she selects the largest male, the one whose size indicates good genes and successful foraging. Perhaps she selects the most persistent, the one who stayed with her longest. Perhaps her choice is partially random, influenced by which male happens to be in the right position at the right moment. Once paired, the male and female entwine, their bodies coiling together in a slow, synchronized dance. The male positions himself alongside the female, aligning their bodies so that his cloaca is opposite hers. He has two hemipenes, reproductive organs housed inside his body near the base of his tail, and during mating, one of them everts, turning inside out, extending from his cloaca. He inserts this hemipenes into the female's cloaca, creating a physical connection that can last for hours. Throughout the mating process, the pair must surface periodically to breathe. They cannot remain submerged indefinitely, even in the throes of reproduction. The female seems to control the timing, signaling somehow when to ascend for air, and the male complies, unwilling to risk losing his opportunity by forcing her to stay down too long. They rise together, bodies still entwined, break the surface, take quick breaths, and then descend again, continuing the mating process. The act itself involves the transfer of sperm from male to female. The hemipenis is covered with small spines and ridges that help anchor it in place inside the female's cloaca, preventing separation during the extended coupling. Sperm travels down a groove in the hemipenis, flowing from the male's reproductive tract into the female's, where it will fertilize her eggs. After copulation is complete, which may take 2 hours or more in some species, the male withdraws his hemipenis, which returns to its resting position inside his body. The pair separates, and the male moves on, searching for other receptive females, attempting to mate multiple times if possible, spreading his genes as widely as he can. The female, now pregnant, begins the long gestation period, her body swelling gradually over the coming months as her embryos grow. She continues to hunt and feed throughout gestation, though her movements become slower and more deliberate as her belly grows heavy with developing young. She needs more food than usual to support both herself and her offspring, and she may alter her hunting strategy, targeting easier prey or spending more time foraging. In the final weeks before birth, she may seek out protected shallow areas, bays or lagoons where predators are fewer and where her newborn young will have the best chance of survival. And when the time is right, when the young are fully developed and conditions are favorable, she gives birth, releasing them into the warm, food-rich waters where they'll begin their lives. Sea snakes face a world that is changing faster than they can adapt, faster than evolution typically operates. Climate change. The slow warming of the oceans, driven by increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide, is reshaping their habitats in ways both obvious and subtle. The most visible impact is on coral reefs, those underwater cities that so many sea snake species depend on. Corals are highly sensitive to temperature. They exist in a narrow range of optimal conditions, and when water temperatures rise too high, even by just a degree or two above normal for extended periods, the corals become stressed. They expel the symbiotic algae that live in their tissues, the zooxanthellae that provide them with food through photosynthesis and give them their vibrant colors. Without these algae, the corals turn white, a process called bleaching, and if conditions don't improve quickly, if temperatures don't drop back to normal, the corals die. Their skeletons remain, white calcium carbonate structures that may persist for years, but the living animal is gone, and with it, the foundation of the reef ecosystem. When corals die, the fish that depend on them for food and shelter disappear. The invertebrates that live among the coral branches vanish. The complex three-dimensional structure begins to erode, battered by waves and consumed by bioeroding organisms, until what was once a thriving reef becomes rubble, a field of broken coral fragments with little life and less habitat. Sea snakes, particularly species that depend on healthy coral reefs for hunting, cannot survive in these degraded environments. They have nowhere to hunt, no prey to catch, no shelter to rest in. Some individuals may move to new areas searching for healthier reefs, but if entire regions are affected, if bleaching is widespread, there's nowhere to go. Populations decline, shrink, and in extreme cases, disappear entirely from areas they once inhabited. This is not a theoretical concern. It's happening now, documented in multiple locations around the Indo-Pacific. Roughly 1/3 of reef-building corals face elevated risk of extinction from climate change and local impacts such as pollution, overfishing, and coastal development. The Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef system on Earth, and one of the most important habitats for sea snakes, has experienced multiple mass bleaching events in recent years, with surveys showing that significant percentages of corals have died. Other reefs across the Pacific and Indian Oceans have experienced similar catastrophes, and when the reefs die, the creatures that depend on them suffer. Sea snakes are among the casualties, though their declines often go unnoticed because they're harder to survey than fish or corals because they're less visible, less studied, less valued by the general public. The loss of sea snakes from Ashmore Reef in Western Australia provides a stark and troubling example of how populations can collapse even in seemingly protected areas. Ashmore Reef, located about 150 kilometers off the northwest coast of Australia in the Timor Sea, was once a biodiversity hotspot. 9 species of sea snakes lived there, along with countless other marine creatures, making it one of the richest sea snake habitats in the world. The reef was designated a marine protected area, fishing was restricted, and the ecosystem appeared healthy. But beginning around 1998, sea snakes began to disappear. Surveys conducted over the following years showed dramatic declines in sea snake abundance. Species that had been common became rare. Some species vanished entirely, their populations dropping from hundreds or thousands of individuals to zero. Today, Ashmore Reef has far fewer sea snakes than it did 25 years ago, and scientists do not fully understand why. The mystery is particularly troubling because the reef itself appears relatively intact. The corals are not all dead. The water quality, while not pristine, is not disastrous. There's no obvious smoking gun, no single catastrophic event that can explain the disappearance of so many snakes. Some researchers suspect a shift in ocean conditions, changes in water temperature or salinity or nutrient availability driven by climate change and altered ocean circulation patterns. The Indian Ocean dipole, a climate pattern similar to El Niño but operating in the Indian Ocean, has become more extreme in recent decades, causing greater temperature fluctuations and altered rainfall patterns that affect coastal waters. These changes might have affected the prey that sea snakes depend on, creating food shortages that led to population declines, or they might have affected the snakes directly, altering their physiology or reproductive success in ways that weren't immediately apparent but accumulated over time. Others point to seismic surveys, the powerful air guns used to map the seafloor for oil and gas deposits. The Browse Basin, Australia's largest untapped conventional gas field, lies beneath Scott Reef and surrounding waters near Ashmore Reef. Seismic exploration in the region has increased dramatically in recent decades as energy companies search for new deposits. The noise from these surveys is intense, among the loudest sounds humans produce in the ocean, capable of causing physical harm to marine animals. The air guns fire repeatedly, creating impulses of sound that travel for kilometers through the water. Fish exposed to seismic surveys have been shown to suffer from hearing loss, internal injuries, and behavioral changes. Sea turtles and whales alter their behavior to avoid the noise. Sea snakes, which rely on sensitive hearing and vibration detection to locate prey and navigate, may be particularly vulnerable. The noise might interfere with their hunting, making it harder to find food. It might cause chronic stress, suppressing immune function and reproductive success. It might even cause direct injury to their ears or internal organs. But without more research, these remain hypotheses, educated guesses. The truth is, we do not know for certain why the snakes of Ashmore Reef have disappeared, and that ignorance is perhaps the most troubling aspect of all. We are losing species, losing biodiversity, losing the intricate web of life that sustains the ocean, and we do not always know why or how to stop it. We're conducting a vast uncontrolled experiment on the planetary ecosystem, changing multiple variables simultaneously, raising temperatures, and altering chemistry, and introducing pollutants and over-harvesting and destroying habitats, and then watching as populations decline and species vanish, struggling to identify which factor or combination of factors is responsible. It's like trying to solve a mystery when all the evidence is circumstantial and the witnesses keep disappearing. The snakes cannot tell us what's wrong. The reef cannot explain what changed. We can only observe, measure, compare, and try to piece together the story from fragments of data. Bycatch represents another significant threat to sea snakes, particularly in regions with intensive trawl fisheries. Sea snakes frequently become entangled in fishing nets, particularly bottom trawls that are dragged along the seafloor to catch shrimp and bottom-dwelling fish. The nets scoop up everything in their path: fish, and invertebrates, and anything else that cannot escape, including sea snakes that happen to be hunting in the area. Once caught in a net, sea snakes often cannot escape. They become tangled in the mesh, their bodies wrapped and compressed, unable to swim freely, and most critically, they cannot surface for air. Even though sea snakes can hold their breath for extended periods, trawl nets are typically dragged for hours before being hauled aboard. By the time the net is retrieved, many sea snakes inside have drowned, their oxygen reserves exhausted, their bodies lifeless. Fishermen sort through the catch, discarding the dead snakes along with other unwanted bycatch, tossing them back into the ocean where they sink to the bottom or are consumed by scavengers. In some regions, thousands of sea snakes die this way each year, an invisible mortality that goes largely unrecorded because bycatch data is often incomplete or non-existent. Fishermen typically don't report bycatch unless required to do so, and enforcement of reporting requirements is often weak or absent. Some countries have implemented bycatch reduction devices, modifications to fishing nets that allow sea snakes, turtles, and other air-breathing animals to escape before they drown. These devices create escape hatches in the net, openings covered by one-way flaps that allow animals to push through and swim free while preventing the target catch from escaping. Where properly implemented and enforced, these devices can significantly reduce bycatch mortality. But adoption is far from universal, and many fisheries continue to operate without them, either because the technology is not required by law or because enforcement is lax. Fishermen often handle sea snakes when untangling them from nets, and despite the snake's potent venom, bites are relatively rare. Most fishermen in regions where sea snakes are common have learned how to handle them safely, gripping them behind the head or using tools to avoid direct contact. And sea snakes, even when being handled, are remarkably tolerant, rarely attempting to bite unless they're grabbed very roughly or held in a way that causes pain. There are cultural traditions in some fishing communities of releasing sea snakes carefully, almost reverently, tossing them back into the water with a gentle motion, perhaps born from respect for these creatures, or from superstition, or simply from the practical knowledge that killing them serves no purpose. But tolerance and tradition only go so far. The sheer number of snakes caught as bycatch overwhelms any careful handling, and many die simply because there are too many to release individually before they suffocate. In some places, sea snakes are harvested intentionally rather than caught accidentally. The meat is considered a delicacy in parts of Asia, particularly in the Philippines and Vietnam, where sea snakes, especially sea kraits, are caught, killed, and sold in markets for human consumption. The meat is reportedly tender and mild-flavored, though not widely popular outside certain regions. The skin is tanned into leather, used for belts, bags, shoes, and other luxury goods, and the internal organs are dried and ground into powders used in traditional medicine, believed to have various health benefits, including treating skin conditions, joint pain, and impotence, though there's no scientific evidence supporting these purported effects. The trade is relatively small compared to other marine fisheries, measured in thousands rather than millions of individuals per year, but it places additional pressure on populations already stressed by habitat loss and climate change. In Japan during the 1970s and 80s, sea kraits were harvested in massive numbers, tens of thousands per year, driven primarily by demand for their distinctive banded skin. The harvest was concentrated around the islands of Okinawa and the Ryukyu chain, where sea kraits were abundant. But the populations could not sustain that level of exploitation. Within a decade, sea krait numbers had crashed, declining dramatically. The fishery collapsed, no longer economically viable because there weren't enough snakes left to catch. The populations have not recovered in the decades since, despite the cessation of commercial harvesting. It's a pattern seen repeatedly in wildlife exploitation, overexploitation leading to population collapse, followed by insufficient recovery even after the pressure is removed. Perhaps because the populations fall below some critical threshold, or because other environmental changes prevent recovery, or simply because reproductive rates are too slow to rebuild numbers quickly. Today there is no legal protection for sea snakes under CITES, The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, the international treaty that regulates trade in threatened species. They fall through the cracks, too obscure, too poorly studied, too undervalued. Most people don't even know sea snakes exist. They're not charismatic megafauna like pandas or whales or elephants that capture public imagination and funding. They're not economically important like tuna or salmon that support major fisheries. They're not particularly feared like sharks, which generate interest through their supposed danger. They're simply there, quietly hunting in coral reefs and coastal waters, largely ignored by conservation efforts that focus on more visible or valuable species. But there are efforts underway to change this, to bring sea snakes into the conservation spotlight, to recognize their value not as resources to be harvested, but as indicators of ecosystem health, as predators that maintain ecological balance, as creatures worthy of protection for their own sake. Scientists, conservationists, and even some fishermen are beginning to appreciate sea snakes, to study them more intensively, to advocate for their protection. The IUCN Red List, the global inventory of threatened species, has assessed all sea snake species, classifying about 9% as endangered, 6% as near threatened, and troublingly, 34% as data deficient, meaning we simply do not know enough about their populations, distributions, or threats to determine their conservation status. This data deficiency reflects the broader challenge of studying marine reptiles. They're harder to observe than terrestrial species, harder to count, harder to track. Many spend most of their time underwater, invisible to casual observers. They don't congregate in accessible locations where surveys are easy. They don't leave obvious signs of their presence. Studying them requires diving, specialized equipment, trained observers, and significant funding, resources that are often directed elsewhere. Marine protected areas, regions where fishing and other extractive activities are restricted or banned, have been established in some sea snake habitats, and early evidence suggests these protections help stabilize populations. In areas where fishing pressure is reduced, where reefs are protected from destructive practices, sea snake populations tend to be higher and more stable than in unprotected areas. But such protections are limited, covering only a small fraction of sea snakes' range. The vast majority of tropical coastal waters have no formal protection. They're open to fishing, coastal development, pollution, and all the other human activities that degrade marine environments. Expanding marine protected areas, enforcing existing regulations, and reducing the impacts of fishing and development represent the most direct ways to help sea snakes. But these actions require political will, international cooperation, and funding, resources that are always in short supply. The challenges facing sea snakes are part of a larger crisis, the slow degradation of the ocean's health that affects virtually all marine life. The ocean is warming, its chemistry changing as it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, becoming more acidic, less hospitable to organisms that build calcium carbonate structures. Nutrient pollution from agricultural runoff creates dead zones where oxygen is depleted and life cannot survive. Plastic waste accumulates in vast gyres, breaking down into microplastics that enter the food web at every level. Overfishing removes predators and prey species, disrupting food webs and causing ecosystem-wide changes. Coastal development destroys mangroves and seagrass beds and coral reefs, eliminating habitat for countless species. And climate change ties all these threats together, amplifying them, making them worse, pushing ecosystems toward tipping points beyond which recovery may be impossible. Yet there is hope. Sea snakes have survived for millions of years, adapting to countless changes in climate, sea level, and ocean chemistry. They endured ice ages when sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters, exposing vast areas of continental shelf and restricting coastal habitats. They survived warm periods when sea levels rose and tropical waters expanded poleward. They weathered volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and the shifting of continents. They are resilient, flexible, capable of colonizing new habitats when old ones become unsuitable. Their wide distribution across the Indo-Pacific, their diverse diets and hunting strategies, their ability to thrive in a range of conditions from clear oceanic waters to murky coastal estuaries, all suggest they can adapt to change, provided we give them the chance, provided we don't push them past their limits too quickly. And giving them that chance means changing how we interact with the ocean. It means reducing greenhouse gas emissions, slowing the warming that is bleaching corals, and shifting ocean currents and altering the fundamental chemistry of seawater. It means protecting critical habitats through marine reserves and sustainable management practices. It means reducing bycatch through better fishing practices and technologies that allow sea snakes and other marine animals to escape nets. It means controlling pollution, reducing the flow of nutrients and plastics and toxins into coastal waters. It means studying these creatures more intensively, learning their life histories and population dynamics and ecological roles, filling in the data gaps so we can make informed conservation decisions. And perhaps most fundamentally, it means valuing sea snakes and all marine life not merely as resources for human use but as components of ecosystems that have intrinsic worth, species that deserve to exist regardless of whether they benefit us directly. There is something deeply moving about sea snakes, something that transcends their practical importance or their ecological roles. They are ancient, their lineage stretching back millions of years through countless generations of evolution, yet they are also modern, still changing, still adapting to new challenges. They are deadly, carrying venom potent enough to kill humans, yet they are gentle, avoiding conflict, refusing to strike except in dire circumstances. They are alien, living in a world of water and pressure and salt that we can only visit briefly with technological assistance, yet they are familiar. Reptiles like the snakes we know from land, sharing our basic vertebrate body plan, our need for oxygen, our reliance on the sun's energy flowing through food webs. They are a bridge between worlds, between land and sea, between our familiar terrestrial existence and the vast blue realm that covers most of our planet. They remind us that life is not confined to a single environment, that evolution is not a straight line but a branching, tangled tree, with species moving between habitats, between ecological niches, constantly exploring, constantly adapting, constantly testing the boundaries of what's possible. And they are beautiful. Watching a sea snake swim, whether in an aquarium or in its natural habitat, is to witness grace incarnate. Every movement is fluid, efficient, purposeful. The body undulates in perfect sine waves, each curve flowing smoothly from head to tail. The paddle tail sweeps back and forth, generating thrust with minimal effort. The snake navigates through coral with the precision of a dancer, avoiding obstacles, slipping through gaps, moving three-dimensionally through space in ways that terrestrial animals cannot. As you rest tonight, as your breathing slows and your thoughts drift, and your body relaxes into sleep, let yourself imagine that world. Picture the warm tropical waters, blue and clear, visibility extending for dozens of meters in every direction. Sunlight filters down through the surface in shimmering columns, the water acting as a lens, concentrating and scattering the light into ever-shifting patterns. Below, a coral reef stretches out, vast and complex, a three-dimensional garden of shapes and colors and textures. Branching corals reach upward like trees. Massive boulder corals form rounded domes. Table corals spread flat surfaces parallel to the surface. Soft corals sway in the current, their tentacles extended, filtering plankton from the water. Fish are everywhere, small dam-shellfish defending territories, larger groupers lurking in shadows, schools of fusiliers streaming past like rivers in the water, their bodies flashing silver as they turn in unison. Anemones dot the reef, their tentacles waving, clownfish darting among them. A moray eel peers out from a crevice, its mouth opening and closing rhythmically, pumping water over its gills. And there, gliding along the bottom, body pressed close to the sand, is a sea snake. Its scales are banded, black and white, bold and beautiful. Its eyes are small but alert, scanning for movement. Its tongue flicks out periodically, sampling the water, searching for the chemical signature of prey. The snake pauses at a crevice, head tilting, tongue working rapidly. Something inside, perhaps, or perhaps just empty darkness. The snake probes tentatively, inserting just the tip of its snout, then withdraws, nothing there. It continues its patrol, unhurried, patient, moving with the efficiency of a creature that has all the time in the world. A few meters ahead, a goby rests on the sand, camouflaged, nearly invisible against the mottled bottom. The snake approaches, low and slow, making no sudden movements. The goby, sensing something, tenses, ready to flee. But the snake's approach is so gradual, so smooth, that the goby doesn't recognize the threat until it's too late. In a flash, faster than the eye can follow, the snake strikes, jaws opening wide, head darting forward, fangs sinking into the goby's body. The fish convulses once, twice, and then goes still, the venom working its terrible magic, shutting down nerves, paralyzing muscles. The snake adjusts its grip, positioning the fish head first, and begins to swallow, jaws walking forward over the prey, throat expanding to accommodate the meal. Somewhere nearby, another snake surfaces. Its head breaks the waterline, so gently that it barely creates a ripple. The nostrils, located on top of the snout, flare open. The snake exhales forcefully, expelling stale air and any water that may have seeped in. Then it inhales, a quick, deep breath, filling its lungs with fresh oxygen. The whole process takes only a few seconds. The valves in the nostrils snap shut, sealing perfectly, and the snake descends again, slipping beneath the surface, disappearing into the blue. Above, the sky is endless, clouds drifting slowly, pushed by trade winds that have blown across this ocean for countless millennia. The horizon is a perfect line where water meets air, the boundary between two worlds, two realms of life, so different yet intimately connected. And all around, the ocean breathes. Currents flow, carrying water and nutrients and heat across vast distances. Tides rise and fall, driven by the moon's gravity, creating rhythms that govern countless lives. Waves march across the surface, generated by distant storms, traveling thousands of kilometers before finally breaking on coral reefs or sandy beaches. The ocean is a living system, dynamic and complex, and sea snakes are threads in its vast tapestry, woven into the fabric alongside